Welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and Giallo enthusiasts. It's Tanner Leeser, your host for The King in Giallo. This is episode 19 of the Forgotten Giallo film series, 1971, Part 3. And I've got one Giallo here I'd like to highlight. As always, thanks in no small part to Troy Howarth's book on Giallo cinema, So Deadly, So Perverse, 50 Years of Italian Giallo Films, Volume 1, 1963 to 1973. Like this video and subscribe to The King in Giallo. Click the notification bell icon so YouTube doesn't hide my new content from you. And if you enjoy what I do here, please consider subscribing to my Patreon. I have loads of exclusive content that can only be found there, including the King in Giallo podcast, the Giallo adjacent podcast, the Rat Hole Burn movie reviews, the Giallo Reads book reviews, the viewings, plus early access to most of my YouTube content. On to the video. Next Giallo of 1971 is The Double, an Italian production. The film is directed by Romolo Guerrieri. The script is written by Alessandro Continenza and Sauro Scavolini, inspired by a novel by Libero Bigiaretti. Music is composed by Armando Trovajoli. The cast is comprised of John Sorrell as Giovanni, Lucia Bozet as Nora Tossati, Eva Olin as Lucia, Silvano Tranquilli as Roger, Sergio Doria as Eddie Kennan, Antonio Pierfederici as Professor Bergamo, and Giacomo Rossi Stewart as Giovanni's brother. The plot follows Giovanni, a wealthy young adult trust fund child who is shot in a parking garage one day and left for dead. As he bleeds out, he recounts his life and the circumstances that may have contributed to his grisly demise. When he was on vacation in Morocco with his girlfriend, Lucia, Giovanni became jealous over her interest in a handsome young American, prompting Giovanni to fixate on Lucia's mother, Nora, to the point that he coerces her into physical intimacy. Giovanni involves himself deeper in the woman's life to the extent that tragedy will befall them all. The movie opens with a set piece I have only seen in one other Giallo film, being The Short Night of Glass Dolls, 1971, which is set to release in cinemas mere months after The Double. The set piece being the murder of the protagonist. The plot thus plays out as a series of flashbacks the lead character relives. As I said with Glass Dolls, this is a proper way, in my opinion, to do in medias res, which is essentially when a movie starts in the middle or at the end, then goes back. The bad version of this is something like 6 months earlier, or earlier that day. This Giallo is one of those bored elites subgenres, but at least offers something very unique in how the action plays out. The character is also much more layered to him and deals with a menagerie of issues plaguing him, stemming from what comes off as an early midlife crisis, which leads to sexual dysfunction and commitment problems with his girlfriend. Despite being very flawed, the character is still sympathetic. Giovanni, with his struggles, does a fine job of capturing the essence of male inadequacy, which in his case has been exacerbated by his comfortable and coddled lifestyle. He's spent a lifetime assuming his own superiority over others, yet the reality slowly sets in that he is in fact a loser who hasn't accomplished anything for himself, and this realization is hammered in by his 19-year-old girlfriend calling him a failure. Giovanni doesn't really do much to resist this persistent knock of reality, except revitalize his vigor, which he flops, inviting doubts to his own sexual prowess. The onslaught of life blinds Giovanni to the bad decisions he is making, and logic seems to abandon him entirely, until the totality of his being is disintegrated all around him. Whereas Glass Dolls takes a more eyes wide shut route in its narrative and unveils several shocks and twists and turns, The Double rather steeps itself in the deep character drama. Howarth describes the film as being closer in spirit to A Rather Complicated Girl, 1969 by Damiano Damiani, which John Sorrell was also in, versus being like any other Giallo. The movie is refreshing as this year of 1971 ushers in more and more Argento-esque clones of The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. The cast and crew are Giallo veterans. Guerrieri previously released the proto-Giallo hit The Sweet Body of Deborah, 1968, which can be said spawned the sexy Giallo subgenre of 1969 on. Guerrieri would abandon the Giallo genre after this film and would make a name for himself in the poliziotteschi crime genre of Italian cinema. John Sorrell made numerous Giallo film appearances in recent years, with Lucio Fulci's A Lizard in a Woman's Skin, 1971, being one of the more celebrated films of his to come out earlier this same year, but The Double remains perhaps the greatest and most complex character role Sorrell ever portrayed in a Giallo film. The leading trio work incredibly well off of each other and help to elevate the performances in this film. The editor also deserves a shout out for his work in executing so effectively the fragmented narrative structure of the movie, Carlo Reali, who would eventually join forces with Mario Bava and would bring a fierceness in the editing for his next film, which would come out later this same year, Twitch of the Death Nerve, aka A Bay of Blood, which is the next Giallo on this channel. I hope you learned something new. If you are interested in watching this movie, look it up online. And if you do watch it or have already seen it, I invite you to leave your thoughts on it below in the comments. Follow The King in Giallo on Instagram and give a like to The King in Giallo on Facebook. Subscribe here on YouTube if you aren't already, and join me every week for new Giallo film content. Join The King in Giallo on Patreon for exclusive content. Upcoming content for The King in Giallo will be the overview, review, and giallitally for the 5th Giallo film from Mario Bava, A Bay of Blood, aka Twitch of the Death Nerve. Thank you very much for your continued support. This is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo, and if nothing else, I'll see you next time.